The story of Mushkil Gusha. Once upon a time, there lived a poor old woodcutter. He was a widower and he lived with his little daughter. Early in the mornings, he used to go every day into the mountains to cut firewood, which he brought home and tied into bundles. After breakfast, he would walk into the nearest town to sell his wood. One day, when he got home very late, the girl said to him, "Father, I sometimes wish that we would have some nicer food and more and different kinds of things to eat." "Very well, my child," said the old man. "Tomorrow I shall get up much earlier than usually do, go further into the mountains where there is more wood, and I shall bring back a much larger quantity than usual. I will get home earlier, and I'll be able to bundle the wood sooner. I will go to town and sell it so that we can have more money, and I shall bring you back all kinds of nice things to eat." The next morning, the woodcutter rose before dawn and went into the mountains. He worked very hard cutting wood and trimming it, and made it into a huge bundle, which he carried on his back to his little house. When he got home, it was still very early. He put his load of wood down and knocked on the door, saying, "Daughter, daughter, open the door, for I am hungry and thirsty, and I need a meal before I go to the market." But the door was locked. The little girl, having forgotten all about their conversation the night before, was fast asleep in bed and could not hear her father knocking. The woodcutter was so tired that he lay down, and he was soon fast asleep beside his bundle. When he woke up a few hours later, the sun was high in the sky already. The woodcutter knocked at the door again and said, "Daughter, daughter, come quickly. I must have a little food before I go to the market to sell the wood, for it is already much later than my usual time of starting." But having forgotten all about the conversation the night before, the little girl had meanwhile got up, cleaned the house, and gone out for a walk. She had locked the door, assuming in her forgetfulness that her father was still in the town. So the woodcutter thought to himself, "Well, it is now rather late to go into the town. I will therefore return to the mountains and cut another bundle of wood. So then tomorrow I'll take a double load to the market." All that day the old man worked in the mountains, cutting wood and shaping the branches. When he got home with the wood on his shoulders, it was already evening. He put down his burden behind the house, knocked on the door, and said, "Daughter, daughter, open the door, for I am tired and I didn't eat anything all day. I have a double bundle of wood which I hope to take to the market tomorrow. Tonight I must get my rest. I must sleep well." But there was no answer, because when the little girl came home, she felt very sleepy. So she made a meal for herself and went straight to bed. She was rather worried at first that her father was not at home, but she decided that he must have arranged to stay in the town overnight. Once again the woodcutter, finding that he could not get into the house, tired, hungry, and thirsty, lay down by his bundles of wood and fell fast asleep. He could not keep awake, although he was fearful of what might have happened to his daughter. Now the woodcutter, because he was so old, hungry, and tired, woke up very, very early the next morning, before it was even light out. He sat up and looked around, but he could not see a thing. And then a strange thing happened. The woodcutter thought he heard a voice saying, "Hurry, hurry, leave your wood and come this way. If you need enough and you want little enough, you shall have delicious food." The woodcutter stood up and walked in the direction of the voice, and he walked and walked but found nothing. By now he was colder and hungrier and more tired than ever, and he was lost. He was initially full of hope, but that did not seem to help him a whole lot. Now he felt sad, and he wanted to cry, but he realized that crying would not help him either. So he lay down and fell asleep again. But quite soon he woke up again. It was too cold, and he was too hungry and too sleepy. So he decided to tell himself, as if in a story, everything that had happened to him, everything that happened since his daughter had first said that she wanted a different kind of food. As soon as he had finished telling his story, he thought he heard another voice saying, somewhere above him, out of the dawn, "Old man, what are you doing sitting there?" "I am telling myself my own story," said the woodcutter. "And what was that?" said the voice. The old man repeated his tale. "Very well," said the voice. And then the voice told the old man to close his eyes and climb up a step with his foot. "But I do not see any step," said the old man. "Never mind, just do as I say," said the voice. The old man did as he was told. As soon as he closed his eyes, he felt that there was a step underneath his foot. So he started to climb up a ladder, a staircase, and suddenly the whole flight of steps started to move like an escalator, very fast. And the voice said, "Do not open your eyes until I tell you to do so." In a very short time, the voice told the old man to open his eyes. When he did, he found that he was in a place which looked rather like a desert, with the sun beating down on him, and there was nothing or no one around. He was surrounded by masses and masses of pebbles, pebbles of all colors, red, green, blue, and white. But he seemed to be alone. He looked around and could not see anyone, but the voice started to speak again. The woodcutter did as he was told, and he found himself, when he opened his eyes again, standing right before the door of his own house. He knocked at the door, and his daughter finally answered it. She asked him where he had been, and he told her everything. Even though she could hardly understand what he was saying, it all sounded so confusing. They both went into the house, and the little girl and her father shared the last food which they had. It was a handful of dried dates. When they had finished eating, the old man thought that he heard a voice speaking to him again, a voice just like the other one which had told him to climb up the stairs. The voice said, "Although you may not know it yet, you have been saved by Mushkil Gusha. Remember that Mushkil Gusha is always here. Make sure that every Thursday night you eat some dates and give some to any needy person, and tell the story of Mushkil Gusha. Or give a gift in the name of Mushkil Gusha to someone who will help the needy. Make sure that the story of Mushkil Gusha is never forgotten. If you do this, and if this is done by those to whom you tell the story, the people who are in real need will always find their way." The woodcutter put all the stones which he had brought back from the desert in a corner of his little house. They looked very much like ordinary stones, and he did not know what to do with them. So the next day he took his big bundles of wood to the market and sold them easily for a high price. When he got back home, he took to his daughter all sorts of delicious kinds of food which she had never tasted before. And when they finished eating it, the old woodcutter said, "Now I'm going to tell you the whole story of Mushkil Gusha. Mushkil Gusha is the remover of all difficulties. Our difficulties have been removed through Mushkil Gusha, and we must always remember it." For nearly a week after that, the old man carried on as usual. He went into the mountains, brought back wood, had a meal, took the wood to the market, and sold it. He always found the buyer without any difficulties. Now the next Thursday came, and the woodcutter forgot to repeat the tale of Mushkil Gusha. Late that evening, the fire had gone out in the house of the woodcutter's neighbors. His neighbors had nothing with which to relight their fires, and they went to the house of the woodcutter. They said, "Neighbor, neighbor, please give us a light from those wonderful lamps of yours, which we can see shining through your window." "What lamps?" said the woodcutter. "Come outside," said the neighbors, "and come see what we mean." So then the woodcutter went outside, and then he saw, sure enough, all kinds of brilliant lights shining through his window from the inside. He went back to the house, and he saw that the lights were streaming from the pile of pebbles which he had put in the corner of his house. But these rays of light were cold, and it was not possible to use them to light a fire. So he went back outside and said, "Neighbors, I'm sorry, but I have no fire." And he banged the door into their faces. They were really annoyed and confused and went back to their house complaining, but they leave our story here. The woodcutter and his daughter quickly covered up the pebbles with every piece of cloth they could find, for fear that anybody else would want to see what a treasure they had. The next morning, when they uncovered the stones, they discovered that they were precious, luminous gems. They took the jewels one by one to neighboring towns, where they sold them for a huge price. With the money from the sales, the woodcutter decided to build for himself and his daughter a wonderful palace. They chose a site just opposite the castle of the king of their country. So in a very short time, a marvelous building had come into being. Their country king had a daughter, beautiful princess, and one day when she got up in the morning, she saw a kind of fairy tale castle just opposite of her father's, and she was amazed. She asked her servants, "Who has built this castle? What right have these people to do such a thing so near our home?" The servants went away and made some inquiries, and then they came back and told the princess the whole story. She asked her servants, "Who has built this castle? What right have these people to do such a thing so near our home?" The servants went away and made some inquiries, and then they came back and told the princess the whole story. The princess summoned the woodcutter's daughter to come for a talk, because she was very angry with her. But when the two girls met, they talked and they very soon became best friends. They started to meet every day and went for a swim and play in the stream, which had been made for the princess by her father. One day the princess took off a beautiful and valuable necklace and hung it up onto a tree branch just next to the stream. She forgot to take it back down when she came out of the water, and when she got home, she thought it must have been lost. After thinking about it a little, the princess decided that the woodcutter's daughter had probably stolen her necklace. The princess told her father all about the incident. So the king had the woodcutter arrested and had his castle and all of his belongings confiscated. The woodcutter was thrown into prison and his daughter was put into an orphanage. As it was the law in that country, after a period of time, the woodcutter was taken from the dungeon and put outside for display at the public square, chained to a post, with a sign around his neck. On the sign, it was written, "This is what happens to those who steal from kings." At first, people gathered around him and jeered and threw things at him. He was most unhappy. But quite soon, everyone became used to the sight of the old man sitting there by the post, and took very little notice of him. Sometimes people threw him scraps of food, sometimes they did not. One day, the woodcutter overheard somebody saying that it was Thursday afternoon. Suddenly, the thought came into his mind that it would soon be the evening of Mushkil, the remover of all difficulties, and that he had forgotten to commemorate him for so many days. No sooner had this thought come into his head than a charitable man passing by threw a couple of coins at his feet. The woodcutter called out, "Generous friend, thank you for giving me money, but it is of no use to me. If, However, your kindness could extend to buying a couple of dates and coming and sitting and eating them with me while I tell you a story. I would be eternally grateful to you." And so the other men went and bought the dates in the market and came back to listen to the woodcutter's story. After they finished eating the dates, the woodcutter told the other men the story of Mushkil Gusha. "I think you must be mad," said the generous man, but he was a kind person himself, who had many difficulties like most of us. When this man arrived home, however, after this incident, he found that all of his problems had disappeared, and that made him start to think a great deal about Mushkil Gusha. But this is where he leaves our story. The very next morning, the princess went back to her outdoor bathing place. As she was about to go into the water, she saw what looked like her necklace down at the bottom of the stream. As she was about to dive in to try to get it back, she happened to sneeze. It was then when she looked up and saw that what she thought was her necklace was only the reflection in the water. It was hanging on a tree branch right where she left it a while ago. Taking the necklace down, the princess ran excitedly to her father and told him what happened. The king gave orders for the woodcutter to be released and given a public apology, returned all of his possessions, including the castle. The little girl was brought back from the orphanage, and everyone lived happily ever after. These are some of the incidents in the story of Mushkil Gusha. It is a very long tale, and it never ends. It has many forms. Some of them are even not called the story of Mushkil Gusha at all, so people do not recognize it. But it is because of Mushkil Gusha that this story, in whatever form, is remembered by somebody somewhere in the world, day or night, wherever there are people, as his story has always been recited, so it will always continue to be told. Will you repeat the story of Mushkil Gusha on Thursday nights and help the work of Mushkil Gusha?